Welcome back. So the S21 Ultra has an over-the-top 108 megapixel main camera. And many people will tell you that the 108 megapixel mode is useless and that you're better off just using the 12 megapixel mode. Well, that's not true, and recent Samsung firmware upgrades have changed the situation. So let's take a closer look. The 108 megapixel sensor is very interesting, otherwise known as the Samsung ISOCELL HM3. It's a small sensor capable of a very high resolution, and it has some computational tricks such as Smart ISO Pro, which will capture multiple frames simultaneously and combine them for better quality. Its most unique feature is that it can shoot at either the full 108 megapixel or combine 9 pixels into one to create a 12 megapixel image, which will have improved low light sensitivity. Now, when the S21 Ultra launched, the camera performance out of that high resolution mode was lacking, but that situation is completely different now with recent software updates. Let's look at some samples. Here we have a 108 megapixel image taken during sunset. If we zoom into the clouds and the trees, it looks pretty good. But as we make our way down to the darker areas of the image, we see a big drop in quality. We can clearly see that the sensor is struggling in low light. Here's the same scene in 12 megapixels. And wow, just look at how the grass is actually green now, and the trees are also better defined. This is why most people claim that the 108 megapixel mode is useless. But let's find out how they're wrong. So here we are back at the same location after the March software update. Take a look at this image. What you're looking at is actually the 108 megapixel shot. And just look at how green that grass is. Now here's the 12 megapixel image for comparison. It's quite surprising how both images are quite similar now. So the question you might ask, is the 12 megapixel image still better? Let's zoom in. Here at the base of the tree, both have similar colors. There's more detail in the 12 megapixel image, especially in the bush on the left. The 108 megapixel image looks a bit fuzzy in comparison, while the 12 megapixel image appears to be a bit sharpened. So does the 12 megapixel win? Not so fast. Let's look at another area of the image, this golden fence. It's a tiny part of the overall image, and on the 108 megapixel shot, we can see it quite clearly. Now let's compare it to the 12 megapixel image. Whoa, this is a pixelated mess. This shows us that 108 megapixels has some advantages in some situations, especially if there's enough light. So let's put that to the test with this image of a tree in the sun. If we zoom in, we can see tons of detail in the bark here. And here's a 12 megapixel image, and it almost looks identical. Now if we zoom in deep on both, we can see that the 108 megapixel retains detail while the 12 megapixel image just starts to become a bunch of pixels. Now if we want to maximize this background blur, we can move closer to our subject and take a macro shot. Here's a macro image taken with 108 megapixel. Keep in mind that this is only one of multiple ways to shoot macro with the S21 Ultra. And I have a macro comparison video coming soon. You'll immediately notice the intense background blur, bringing attention to the flower. And if we zoom in on the center of the flower here, we can see how narrow the focus really is. We just captured the very center area here. It's pretty awesome to see such a narrow depth of field coming from a smartphone. In summary, if you have a S21 Ultra, don't be afraid to use the 108 megapixel mode. It can capture some impressive detail with enough light, and if you can get close to your subject, it can get some amazing background blur. Switch to the 12 megapixel in low light, or if you want to shoot RAW. More on that later. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.